G'day expats and welcome to another episode of Expat Chat, episode 129 today. And today I'm actually joined with a special guest host, Adam Prentice, who is one of the financial planners out of the Dubai office. He's currently in Australia, so I've pinned him down while he's doing a bit of a kangaroo tour, I guess. Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say, Adam. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. Yeah, good afternoon to everyone too. It was good to see you last week as well, James. Part of my tour. So yeah, no, it's good to be back and seeing everyone.
Absolutely, mate. And last week, Adam, he dropped into the Gold Coast and then we're in Brisbane together because we attended our National Association conference where you essentially have about 2 to 4,000 financial planners all in the one place attending webinars and CPDing and getting up to date and connecting with some great ideas. That was a great experience. Good to see what next year's going to bring. And I think a key theme was a lot of AI and generative AI is now being encompassed to help and support a lot of financial planners, but can't really rely on it for advice aspects yet because that's still all very human based. But mate, today I wanted to pin you down for a bit of Q&A because for those that are listening, if this is your first time listening, we do run our own online Facebook group. It's called the Australian Expat Financial Forum. There's over 3,500 members in there, and there's a lot of questions that get thrown around, a lot of myth busting as well. So I thought, all right, I'll pull some questions out while I've got Adam on the, I suppose, on state-based land. I'll pin him down and get some questions into him. Before we jump into it today, Adam, quick disclaimer. For those that are listening or watching us on YouTube, anything you hear today should not be construed as personal financial advice or any form of personal advice. If you do need advice, please do seek advice from a registered professional, whether it's a lawyer, tax financial advisor, licensed financial advisor, mortgage broker, whatever have you, seek appropriate advice. But today it's just for entertainment purposes only. Mate, why don't we jump into it? I've got a few good questions that I'm going to throw out to you. Pepper's been very active in the Facebook group, so we'll start off with hers and we'll jump into it. So is it only for tax residents to be able to use equity in their investment property to help me in purchasing another property?
Yeah, definitely general advice after that conference too, mate. Definitely. Thanks, Pepper. So the short answer to that question is no. You have equity in that property. You can use it. Um, There are different limitations what banks will give you depending on where you're located in the world. For example, what I see with some of our UAE clients is Australian banks will only look at maybe 80% of their income on the loan, or they may put in, tax calculations into that loan calculation as well. It really just depends. But yeah, the short answer is no to that question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you're spot on. I talked to Jeremy, our mortgage broker, on one of our other podcasts, and they do these things which is called income shaving. And depending on where you are in the world, they look at different currencies and sort of what tier they are. US dollars as an example, it's considered just this almost similar to the Australian dollar when they're looking at your situation. Um, we'll move into Pepper's three-parter question today. Can I in any way use some equity as a non-tax resident to help purchase, or will my next deposit all need to be cash?
Yeah, so definitely can use your equity to purchase another property. Again, as James touched upon, there may be risk mitigation factors that the bank will take into account depending on your personal situation. So definitely not brown paper bags of cash being handed over.
That's right, mate. That's right. And I guess this is just more insight from Pepper. She plans to use these properties to support her income. She's only 43 now. And once these are paid off, have the option to return to Australia or maybe live in one, move around a bit, live maybe in Spain as she's a dual citizen. That's maybe just a bit more information around that. Is the outstanding balance severely, slightly, or not impacting my ability to borrow? I've cut off a question there accidentally, but Pepper is actually referring to her HECS debt. So Pepper has a HECS debt. There's an amount outstanding on a HECS, and she's asking the question, does having a HECS debt impact my borrowing power? What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so any sort of liability will. HECS used to be the best debt that you could ever get. Not so much so now with current rates and inflation and increasing. However, yeah, they will look at, all debts, including things like credit cards as well. Shaving these down will support your ability to borrow.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It does factor in all banks when they're running your applications for mortgages. They factor in HECS debt, any debt, and there's usually tools that they can use also to identify debt overseas, credit cards, those sort of things. They can be a bit of kryptonite because often if you're in the US, as an example, they give credit cards out like they're nothing, like lollies, to be honest, and has a real impact on your borrowing power. So really good question there, Pepper. We'll jump into another set of questions. This question's from Emma. I need some advice on shares in Australia that you cannot sell unless you have an Australian address. So we should be talking about some sort of platform back in Australia.
Yeah. Problem we often come across is a lot of Australian brokers, for example, CommSec, NabTrade, they don't allow non-residents on the platform. And I normally say that's for two reasons. So one is anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing laws. They don't want to have to identify, Emma sitting wherever she is in the world.
Mm.
Even though you may be a long-term customer of someone like CommBank, CommSec and CommBank, well, same bank, they don't talk to each other. So they just don't have the capabilities to do that. And then number two is what has to happen when you're a non-resident. If you earn a dividend off a share, they should be taking out withholding tax, which is 15% or 30%, depending on if Australia has a tax treaty with that country. CommSec don't have the capabilities to do that, to pay that directly to the ATO would be a bit of an administrative burden. So this is a problem, yeah, we often come across. There are a number of platforms that do allow non-residents, but normally they come with an advisor associated with that account. We've done our AML checks. We're happy. We've seen where where your income's coming from, your passport, etc. And then they allowed us, to trade on your behalf.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good question, Emma, because a lot of these platforms that Adam mentioned there, a good example is probably ComSec because I've had bumped heads with ComSec recently for a client. But uh, they usually lock your account restricted. They sometimes kick you off. And when they kick you off them, they allocate your shares just to the share registry platforms, which makes it even harder. Because if you want to try and trade on some sort of share registry platform like Computershare or Link Market Services, they're not designed to be a broker. You can, but they charge brokerage fees sometimes up to $120 for a very small trade of maybe $1,000. It's ridiculous, to be honest. But once they're on share registries, you're really somewhat landlocked to that registry unless you try and open another brokerage platform somewhere else, or you engage someone to help you in specie, which is essentially just transferring the shares off the registry, which is normal, onto some sort of broker, and then that advisor can help you sell them down, rebalance, whatever it might be. But that's a really common one. I know that's given a lot of our clients a fair bit of grief, and I think often we're probably considered the cleanup crew, the mop up crew,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
helping them do that.
definitely. And yeah, who likes getting those mail letters from boardroom, link market services, computer shop? It becomes a killing trees exercise.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. So good question, Emma, and hopefully that's provided some clarity around that one. Another question here from Sam. Um, this is not going to be something I can provide too much insight in. So, Adam, this is coming your way. How long do I need to be living back in Australia, or what do I have to do to be clear of UK inheritance tax obligations? So you might need to give us some background on that one.
Yeah, definitely. Sam, very good question. And these rules recently changed as of 6th of April 2025. So the UK have moved away from their non-dom status into a residence-based tax system. Essentially, if you have been in the UK for over 10 years, you fall into that bracket, 10 of the last 20 years. And then you're subject to inheritance tax depending on how long you've been there. They call it an inheritance tax tail. So I think it'd be good to just go through an example. So if an individual has been in the UK as a resident for between 10 and 13 years, you will fall into the tail for an additional 3 years. So if you go back to Australia after 13 years, you're subject to inheritance tax for an additional 3 years, while in Australia, then each year after year 13, so let's say year 14, you've spent 14 years in the UK, it's an additional 1 year in the tail. So 4 years, 15 years will be 5 years, all the way up to 20 years. That'll be 10 years.
Gosh, that's punitive, isn't it? The UK or the HMRC doesn't want to let you go. That's shocking.
No, yeah, they've realized, and it is a bit grim to talk about, like essentially telling people to stay alive. It is a pretty grim one.
Yeah, I mean that's shocking that one. That's got to be up there with probably one of the worst. Yeah, as you said, tail end UK inheritance taxes. You're no longer living there, but they've still got their fingers in the pie there until and as you said, it obviously just slowly winds down depending on your residency period there. But I know I've got mates over there. I've got clients that are in the UK. They've been there for a very long time, but this is definitely a new one. So that's going to really, really play into some important tax planning and probably how you're holding your assets for the long term. Anyone new that's heading to the UK very
Yeah,
soon as well.
yeah, for sure. And that's for, worldwide assets. If the asset is, say, a UK property, that will fall into it no matter what. That's UK taxable income. So just noting that too.
Yep. Yep. No, good one there. Great question, Sam. Another question here from David. Uh, I need to make some regular transfers from my CommBank account in Australia to my US bank account. Call it chunks of $10,000. All funds are legal and provable on both ends. Thanks for that comment, David. That's good. What way is best to do these transfers? Well, I mean, we can't really touch on specific products, but I mean, I think it's a known that there's a lot of different currency transfer providers out there. There really is. The list is endless. We've named names previously. I think we've got some names on our website as well. It can be OFX, Wise, XE, TorFX. They all offer similar rates. Often it's going to come down to probably usually maybe a mate or a family member that's recommended one, and that's the one you go and use. But yeah, obviously checking that you are getting the best kind of exchange rate, comparing them as well. You might open a few accounts and just compare the exchange rate because some will offer better ones. I've seen people get super creative there, and that's for another time, that story. But most of the currency providers are pretty sharp. I'm happy to admit that I don't often encourage clients to go from, say, a US bank or an Australian bank direct to a foreign bank. And the reason for that is usually you're not getting the best kind of exchange rates. They're giving the spot rate, but a bank in Australia might charge you 5 to 10% on that kind of transfer or that exchange rate, which means they're making an absolute killing out of you by relying on them to do, say, a conversion into US dollars. So right now the going rate might be 64 cents, 64 3 cents if we're converting $1 to Australian dollar to US dollar. God, that rate's shocking for us, isn't it? And then, uh, but the Commonwealth Bank might only be giving you, say, 60 cents, which is just remarkable. So you're just taking a massive hit there, and you're losing a lot of your money very quickly. So it does pay to be, I think, quite strategic, do a bit of research, but there's a lot of currency providers out there which offer usually quite sharp rates around that. I think I've probably I've addressed that question pretty good there.
Yeah, yeah. The only thing I will add is sometimes platforms will give you a better exchange rate if you transfer more. So I know you're going in chunks of 10,000, but if you did, 10 in one, that might give you a better rate. But then you are playing the currency movements over the next 11 months, let's call it. So yeah, personal
Yep.
preference.
Yep. Absolutely. And moving into question 5 from Campbell. This one's a bit of a long one. It's around US stuff, so I might take this one. 401k in the US. Where can I find more information regarding tax obligations to the ATO on my 401k account in the US when withdrawing in retirement? That's a good question, Campbell. That's part one. I'll address that one. There's actually quite a lot of tax determinations that are put out by the ATO on how they treat foreign retirement accounts. 401ks are often in that. 403Bs are very similar, and same with even Social Security as well. Often you actually have to go to the legal database on the ATO website, and you can almost type in 401k, and there's usually a lot of recent rulings that have come out in the last couple of years that might help you just have an understanding of how the 401k is actually taxed. Separate to that, you can always engage a good accountant that can do a private ruling on your behalf. A private ruling helps you understand, it goes to the ATO looks at it, and then they come back with essentially a report saying how they would tax that kind of income stream. We've got a pretty good working knowledge of how they're treated, and it's well known within our industry that often they are treated as a type of investment trust or foreign investment trust, and the distribution is often captured under a Section 99B distribution. And what that just means is that ATO sees it as some sort of withdrawal or distribution from a foreign trust. And then that helps us understand how that would be taxed. So taking, I guess, that a step further, the ATO says that there's two components of that trust. There's what you've put in, which is the original capital or corpus, and that's from your, maybe in this case, salary, sacrificing, matching contributions with your employer contributions as well. That makes up a proportional percentage of your account. And then the other portion will be the growth, unrealized gains, income distributions, reinvested. That part of it, which is from the gains and income that's built up over the years, that's actually taxable in the eyes of the ATO. The first component from capital, the contributions, that's tax-free in the eyes of the ATO. Often the account's going to need some clear reports on that one, so they can decide what's taxable and what's not. And you'll also get a tax credit for any tax that's withheld on the US side when you bring it back to Australia. So you do want to make sure you've got a good accountant that can help delineate the difference there between the components, the tax credit, all those sort of things. There's another good question here. Is there a difference in tax obligations between the 401k and the Roth IRA? The background here, I worked in the US before. I'm now an Australian citizen, but I'm not a US resident and citizen. So unfortunately, Roths are treated much like 401ks, which is a little bit unfortunate because for those that aren't in the US, not familiar with the US system, a Roth IRA is an after-tax account where you can contribute an amount to it each year. It then grows technically tax-free in the US, and then you can withdraw it after 59 and a half, and that withdrawal is also tax-free in the US. But the ATO doesn't see it like that. The ATO just sees it as another type of investment account like the 401k, and will seek to tax you on the withdrawals on the growth component again, which is a little bit annoying. But it just means if you are repatriating, you need to be a little bit more considerate and strategic with those kind of withdrawals around timing of repatriation, tax residency starting, all those sorts of things. So that's a good question there, Campbell. I hope we've addressed those. And that's actually the end of our questions today. Just a couple to run through. Obviously get Adam on the call. Adam, when are you heading back over to the Middle East? Oh, might have lost Adam actually. That's okay, mate. We'll kick into the rest of the session today. So again, for those that haven't joined the Australian Expat Financial Forum Facebook group, jump in there. Some great questions getting around. As we wind out the end of the year, we've got a big year coming up next year. We do have the RBA meeting tomorrow, next week, sorry. So we'll see if we get an RBA cut before the end of the year. Unlikely based on that recent information that's come out, but we'll leave it there. We really appreciate you joining on today's episode. And in the meantime, Adam, thanks for coming on, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See you, mate.